Hello bunnies, welcome back to Woodland Bunny. Today we're going to be discussing all of the books I read in August and which ones I recommend to you. So starting with stats, I read 13 books this month, which is equivalent to 4,394 pages. Splitting that up between audio and physical, I read 4 via audiobook and 9 physically. And then in terms of what I rated them, I rated 2 of them 3 stars, 8 of them 4 stars, 1 4.5 stars and 2 5 stars. So let's get into the actual books that I read this month. Beginning with my 3-star books in no particular order, we have Vagabonds. Now this has themes of Nigerian social commentary in a fictional manner, following a variety of narrators and a lot of short stories packed into one. Now I found personally for me a lot of these stories did go over my head, and I also found that I would get really used to one narration style and then it was flip and switch between narrators and I just get lost. I found some comments and the way in which things were described I was just lost on, but I overall really enjoyed how the language was portrayed within this novel and how it was developed and embedded into the novel, and also some of the social commentary around it alongside some of the stories and points of views that I did understand and comprehend. This is definitely one in which I do want to revisit because I feel like in a different mindset and a different way in which I read it I will comprehend it differently. As a poolside book, which is what I was doing while reading it, I don't feel as though I managed to grapple what the concept was entirely, as I wasn't able to annotate it and highlight and kind of dig deeper with what the words were saying. So that one is a 3 stars from me. Then my next 3-star read was Lost Boy. I spoke about this in a previous vlog, but this has themes of kink discussion, gender identity and rejection of gender norms, homelessness, childhood abandonment and substance abuse. Now, as I mentioned in my previous vlog, in case you haven't watched that one, I was a bit torn on whether I enjoyed the concept of Peter Pan being really loosely intertwined with this book because of those themes. Now, I've never experienced or read anything like it where we had these kind of contrasting themes and inspiration combined into one. And yeah, it was kind of a 50-50 split on how I felt about it. But if any of those themes sound interesting to you, then I highly recommend picking this book up because again, I feel as though you can get a lot from it and almost have a discussion with the book of sorts. So yeah, that was my last 3 stars. So moving on to my 4-star read. Let's start with The Lost Girls, in which has themes of female friendships, found family, it's sapphic, revenge and vampires. And this is fun. It was just your kind of typical I don't like to say it, but guilty pleasure read. It was so easy to digest and get through, and I highly recommend it if any of those themes sound interesting to you. Then my next 4-star read was Pod, in which I really recently read, and wow, this was so much deeper than I anticipated. But let me list you the themes. The themes are loss and grief, life and belonging, social constructs and point of view of sea creatures. And as I was saying, it really hit me and was really darker and deeper than I first expected or anticipated from this book. It brought so much emotion and I found myself sympathizing with the characters, although it was from a perspective of a sea creature. You kind of just felt this innate emotional response and feeling towards one another, I suppose. There was one point of view, because I do believe it was dual point of view. I feel like it might have been a third perspective in there, but I knew there was two perspectives that I really enjoyed, but I feel like there was a third one in which I just didn't like at all, and it kind of pulled me away from the story. But it wasn't that often in the book that it led me to rating it lower than 4 stars. So a still very enjoyable read, and if any of those themes sound interesting to you, then I do recommend this one. Next up is a first manga in which I've read in ages, and my first Junji Ito, which is Black Paradox, and this felt like a fever dream. So my themes that I have listed for this is felt like a fever dream, so captivating, and then obviously the pictures and illustrations kind of tell the story itself. I don't really want to go into what this was about or how I felt, because I feel as though just is so important for this book just to go into it with no expectations and just read it, fly through it. Such a quick read, really good if you're just in a bit of a slump or you're not quite sure what to pick up next. I just read this one, flew through it, had an amazing time, was left reeling after it, and yeah, so enjoyable, and definitely has led me to want to read more Junji Ito because my boyfriend recommended that one for so long, and so now I think I'm going to dive into more of his collection because he's started collecting Ginger Ito. So the next 4-star read for me was Wild and Wicked Things, in which I have listed themes of sapphic romance, witches, finding magic, a small island, friendship, family, secrets and lies. And it was so fun. It was such a fun read. There was just different points of view and perspectives again, in which I think I'm coming to love dual POV. I wasn't a huge fan of them at the start of this year, I'd say, but I'm coming to, I mean, it's growing on me. I'm starting to enjoy them, but yeah, I just loved the friendships in this and the characters in this, and it was just an overall fun read, set on a remote island full of witches and gothicness and just delight. Then my next 4-star read was Mother Thing, in which I have themes of depression, ghosts and being haunted, dark and unhinged protagonist, obsession, protectiveness and extremities. And I feel as though that final adjective really sums up this whole book in its entirety. It was just so crazy and unhinged, and you didn't even know what was going on. You couldn't anticipate it. It was so good. It was such a wild ride. Had so much fun. I listened to it via audiobook as well, in which just added to the experience. And yeah, it was just so amazing being in this protagonist's mind, because you did not anticipate what was happening next. And yeah, truly fun to read, and I highly recommend. The next 4-star read is The Maidens, in which I read for my Dark Academia vlog, and that has themes of Old English school, plot twists, murder mystery, believing in toxic love and Greek tragedies. And I feel as though those adjectives really sum up this book for its entirety. It was just a delight. It was just so much fun, and it really did give me that Dark Academia vibe with that murder mystery running through it, and it was such a plot twist at the end. Didn't anticipate that, didn't expect that coming whatsoever, and yeah, it was almost like you were led to believe this one thing, and the author was really pushing this belief on you, and then at the end it was just a huge plot twist. Everything you ever knew was changed, and yeah, so much fun. Definitely recommend if those themes sound interesting to you. Next up is Almond, in which the themes in which I have for this is graphic scenes with no emotion portrayed, naivety, complexity of humans, death, friendship and love. And this book was so fantastic. It was so great, and I kind of don't want to say too much about it, because it was just such an experience reading it, and I really enjoyed it, and I feel as though those themes really speak for themselves for this book. So if those themes do sound interesting to you, then check out Almond. Then we have my final 4-star read, in which is The World Cannot Give. And then I have themes noted down for this: obsession, cult-like behaviour, loss of faith in humanity, and morality questioned. And this for me was just a typical Dark Academia book. It was everything I was craving and looking for in this. It delivered. So fun, so obsessive and full of cult-like behaviour, a school setting, and just kind of when I think of Dark Academia, I do associate this book. So if you're in the lookout for a Dark Academia novel and you haven't read this one, then I'd recommend doing so. Moving on to my 4.5-star reads. First up, we have Ace of Spades, and the themes I have noted down for this are secret society, private school, racism, fighting for justice, constant plot twists, dual POV, betrayal, and don't know who to trust. And I don't want to say too much about this because I don't want to give anything away, but what a wild ride it was. If those themes pique your interest, then I recommend checking this one out 100%. I had so much fun with it. A true delight, and I couldn't stop thinking about it as soon as I closed that last page. Again, I read that for my Dark Academia vlog, so if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts, then head over to that one. Next up, my 5-star reads, we have By Ash, Oak and Thorn, in which the themes I have for this are wholesome life lessons, nature and humans' relationship with it, the simple joys of life, and animals being friends. Now, I read the second installment in this series or duology, I'm not quite sure, first, because I had it gifted to me and I didn't realize this was like the first installment of it, so I did read it the other way around, but not that that really mattered because this was a whole different adventure in itself. And yeah, it was just so much fun, so good, such an easy, simple read, and really connected me to that inner child. So yeah, for something light, wholesome and connecting you to that inner child, I recommend this one. So then finally we have my feature book and my last 5-star read of this month, in which is Empire of the Vampire. If you didn't expect that coming, where have you been? Oh, this book was so much fun. I do have some content warnings for it, and that includes violence, blood, death, homophobia, animal death, sexual content, high amounts of swearing, and foul language. But content warnings aside, what I loved was the detail and the world building and the characters, the narrative style, and how it was being told to us in an interview like aspect, and almost the interviewer asking questions that we wanted to find out ourselves. Then it was almost like multiple timelines because it was being told in that narrative, and each of the timelines would sort of end on that little bit of a cliffhanger. So you wanted to read the next timeline because you were intrigued to find out more, but also wanted to go back to the other timeline because you want to find out how that ended. And it did feel a bit disconnected, but in the best possible way. But my other negative for it would have been, and what could have been better I suppose, is that it did feel a bit disjointed. So I feel, because I was listening to it audibly for the most part, I wasn't quite sure when it would be switching timelines. So the interviewer would sometimes come in and would speak about it, so I'm like, okay, we're switching timelines, but then I would have to try and race back and remember, like, okay, whereabout are we now, what did we just discuss, etc, etc, etc. I'm not sure if I would have had that same issue physically, because I'm not too sure if it did kind of say physically what timeline we were in, but that was the one sort of criticism I had with it, I suppose. But I feel like that's more of a personal problem in terms of like just trying to memory recall. But yeah, that was such a good book, highly recommend, definitely one of my favorites of all time, and I've already pre-ordered the sequel to it. So those are all of the books in which I read in the month of August. Thank you ever so much for being here. I love to know what books you read in the month of August too, and I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have a wonderful day or night, and until next time, friends, bye.